All 4 women were found in an area off Calder Road in League City in the mid-'80s and early '90s.
I think Clyde is still extremely dangerous. I don't think there's any way possible that Clyde is finished doing what he's accused of doing in the past.
There's some disturbing things hiding in these small towns, and we are here to share them with you, so let's find out.
Your town might be on the list. Get ready. Elmendorf, Texas was the home of Joe Ball, who committed a series of gruesome crimes in the 30s. Now, this is an absolutely insane case here. I'm sure viewers from Texas are very familiar with Joe Ball, but I'd never heard of this story, and I'm pretty surprised that it's not more well known. So, Joe Ball was a serial killer. He has a couple interesting nicknames: the Butcher of Elmendorf and the Alligator Man, both of which fit. He fought in World War I, and when he returned to Texas, he started making money as a bootlegger. Then, when Prohibition ended, he opened a saloon. At the back, he built a pond where he kept 6 alligators. He'd often feed live cats and dogs to the gators, but that didn't satisfy him for long. Soon, women in the area started going missing, including his own wife. Now, in 1938, 2 county sheriffs arrived at his property to question him about several of these missing women, and Ball pulled out a pistol and took his own life. But a handyman of Joe's, Clifford Wheeler, told authorities about how he'd assisted Ball in disposing of the bodies of 2 women who he'd killed, feeding them to his alligators. It's believed Joe Ball may have taken the lives of at least 20 women.
Next up, we have a small town in Texas that was once home to a lesser known but incredibly gruesome serial killer, Henry Lee Lucas, who claims to have killed over 3,000 individuals during his criminal career, which spanned from the 1960s all the way into the 1980s. Also known as the Confession Killer or Highway Stalker, Lee Lucas was born in Blacksford, Virginia, and at a young age lost his father to hypothermia, and so his mother was forced to raise him on her own. Clearly, Henry wasn't happy with this, as his mother was the first person he killed in 1960 in Michigan. He was sent to prison but only served 10 years due to overcrowding. And that's when he moved to Ringgold, Texas with his niece Frida Powell to work for a sick woman named Katie Rich, both of whom he would later kill. While he claimed to have ended the lives of thousands of individuals through restricting airways, impaling them with sharp objects, blunt force, and hit and runs, he was convicted of only 11 killings.
Texarkana is home to one of the creepiest cases in the state's history, the Texarkana Moonlight Killer case. So this case was heavy inspiration for slasher movies that would come years later, along with tons of urban legends. The killer literally wore a sack with holes cut out for his eyes and would attack innocent couples while their cars were parked in an area called Lover's Lane. It's about as classic as it gets. So the first attack happened on February 22nd, 1946. A young couple, Jimmy Hollisand and his girlfriend Mary Jean Larry, were attacked by a man with a pillowcase over his head carrying a firearm. Jimmy was pistol whipped and very injured, and Mary was attacked, but the 2 lived. Many of the other victims wouldn't be so lucky though. He would attack 6 other people, and it all happened in a period of 10 weeks. The assailant became known as the Phantom of Texarkana, and the case was never solved.
Regular hospitals are bad enough, but abandoned and haunted hospitals definitely take the cake, so of course we had to include at least one on today's list. The Yorktown Memorial Hospital, located in Yorktown, Texas, between San Antonio and the Gulf Coast. It was built in 1951 to house and treat those suffering from substance abuse. When the hospital was abandoned in 1980, the living residents and staff members exited the building. But what about those who died during their time in the hospital? Well, it's said that they still inhabit the premises to this day. And no, I'm not talking about 1 or 2 patients who died while under the hospital's care. I'm talking about thousands, over 2,000 to be exact. So really, it's no wonder the place is extremely haunted. Honestly, I'm surprised it didn't open up some kind of gateway to hell and land a spot on the list in our last video. Check it out if you'd like. Those who have entered the building have reported feeling a strange rotting sensation and claim that they can feel the tormented soul's energies in the walls. Not only that, but many people have said they've heard screams and disembodied voices while inside, as well as seeing strange floating lights in the hallways, despite the fact that the building is ancient and has no electricity. If you've been, let me know your experience.
Now we move on to Kerrville, Texas, with the case of Janine Jones, a nurse who also terrorized San Antonio. What An absolute creep this woman is. Yes, she is still alive. She took the lives of an estimated 60 young patients in her care between 1970 and 1982. She'd inject patients with a variety of substances that would cause cardiac arrest. She first started working as a licensed vocational nurse at Bexar County Hospital in San Antonio in the Pediatric Intensive Care Unit. But hospital staff started realizing that an abnormal amount of young patients were dying in Jones's care. Now, here's where things get really infuriating. An investigation could have been carried out right there and then, and things could have ended here. But the hospital didn't want any negative attention, and they certainly did not want to be sued. So instead of alerting authorities, they asked all of their current LVNs to resign and then rehired exclusively registered nurses to take control of the pediatric ICU. This meant that Jones could just move on and start working at another hospital, which she did. So more young patients died at her hands at a pediatrician's clinic in Kerrville. There, a doctor finally found she'd been accessing lethal amounts of succinylmethonium chloride. So in 1985, she was finally convicted and is now serving life in prison.
Circling right on back to Yorktown, it appears as though this particular town is home to not only an incredibly haunted hospital, but also an incredibly disturbing creature known as a Wendigo. Although the creature is best described in Algonquin folklore, which is Canadian for my Americans on this channel, many locals of the town claim to have seen one of the beasts. Many people have compared the Wendigo to a skinwalker, as it is tall and lanky and somewhat humanoid, but can shapeshift and has been known to devour human flesh. And when a Wendigo finds the body of a deceased hiker, it will often inhabit it, and then turn to killing those who attempt to come into contact with its human exterior. Many people also claim to have seen the demon take the form of animals and follow and stalk them throughout the area. Stay safe out there in Wendigo.
Speaking of creepy creatures, Texas is also home to an entity known as Goatman, who stalks the old Alton Bridge connecting Denton and Copper Canyon. So the tale traces back to a black goat farmer named Oscar Washburn, who'd moved his family near the bridge. And Washburn earned a reputation as a very reliable businessman and was nicknamed the Goatman by locals. He even hung a sign on Alton Bridge pointing towards his home, proudly declaring, "This way to the Goatman." But in 1938, members of the local government who had ties to the Ku Klux Klan kidnapped Washburn from his family. They took him to the bridge, hung a noose around his neck, and threw him over the side. When they looked down expecting to see him dead though, they found the noose completely empty. Now, locals warn that crossing the bridge at night without headlights, just as the Klansmen did, will summon the Goatman. People crossing the bridge will claim to spot ghostly figures, mysterious lights coming from the woods, and even physical encounters like being touched, grabbed, or having rocks thrown at them from some unseen force. Or of course a half-man, half-goat monster.
Next up, surprise, surprise, it's another creepy hospital. Worley Hospital in Pampa, Texas. The institution was opened in 1928 but closed its doors in the 1970s due to lack of revenue. After 40 years of sitting abandoned, the building has become quite a talking point for the town's locals, who claim that it is haunted by patients who died within its walls during its 42 years of operation. After many townspeople reported seeing a black silhouette in the window of the abandoned building, ghost hunters began to take interest. Those who have entered have been greeted with decrepit and decaying walls, ceilings, and floors that have been heavily vandalized. But it appears as though trespassers aren't the only ones to make their way through the empty halls of the once surgically specialized facility. Many of the patients who died within the building's walls, as well as a 25-year-old nurse who was poisoned while working at the hospital, are said to roam the grounds. People have reported seeing demonic creatures stalking them while exploring the floors of the hospitals, with the majority of the activity taking place on the 3rd floor, where surgeries would have been performed when the hospital was running. Oh, and the current owner of the grounds wants to renovate the building into a ministry. Coincidence? I do not think so.
League City, Texas is home to an area known as the Killing Fields. So there is an abnormally large list of people who have been found dead in this stretch of land surrounding Interstate Highway 45. And there are also a number of people who've gone missing from this area and have still yet to be found. And out of more than 30 cases, only a small handful have ever been solved. The place is such a hotspot for mysterious deaths that a task force operating Operation HALT was set up just to investigate these incidents alone. The first cases started cropping up in the 70s with the discovery of multiple bodies scattered throughout the area, and over the decades, law enforcement agencies have recovered the remains of numerous people, many of them young women. And it's not even clear if there's just one assailant responsible, a group, or if the area is just an ideal spot to kind of get rid of evidence. We really don't know. It's a complete mystery to this day.
And finally, we have a man with a thing for eyes. Stealing them, that is. It all started in the 1990s in a rural area of Dallas. Is it a town? Not really, but this case is pure evil, so listen up. During the 90s, sex workers began turning up dead at an alarming rate, with one very striking thing in common. You guessed it, their eyes had been completely removed from their sockets. The killer was Charles Albright, also known as the eyeball killer. When he was young, Charles had quite the knack for taxidermy. He would stuff many animals a week, doing his best to make them look pristine, but there was one thing missing: eyes. His mother refused to buy glass eyes for the animals, and so instead Charles would use buttons. When he got a little older, he slept with an sex worker, which led to him getting a transmitted infection. I feel like the pieces are starting to come together. His obsession with the eyes and his hatred for women of this certain profession grew exponentially over the years, and on December 13th of 1990, he took his first life. After violating the woman, he fired a projectile from a handheld weapon, execution style, into the back of her head and carefully removed the eyes of the victim with what has been described as surgical precision. Charles was convicted of 1 killing, but most likely committed at least 3. He was sentenced to death and was executed in August of 2022.
What I've learned from this list is not to go to the hospital if you're in Texas. I mean, you don't want to be in the hospital anyway, ever.
No.
But it seems they're either haunted, one of the nurses is intentionally going to try and kill you.
Yep. Traveler's insurance doesn't sound so bad right now. Was that a Texas accent? Maybe. No.
He's getting there.
Alright, you guys.
We're going to catch you in the next video.
Yes, we will.
Alright, Texas.
Oh, there we are with the accent again. You know, if we get enough likes on this video, I will do a Texas accent in our next one.
Oh, there's a good challenge.
Incentive.